The rain was falling hard that morning when Jake Lawson noticed her, sitting alone at the corner table of the small town cafe, her left arm in a brace, her eyes fixed on nothing. Most people wouldn't have looked twice. But Jake had seen that look before. It was the same hollow stare he'd worn when he came home from his third deployment. When the uniform came off, and silence became heavier than any gunfire, he was just a single dad trying to hold things together. Raising his 10-year-old daughter, Lily, after his wife's passing, had been both his saving grace and his greatest test. He'd taken a quiet job at the mechanic's shop down the road, stayed away from the noise of politics and parades. He didn't want to be a hero anymore, just a father who didn't mess up again. But that morning, fate sat across the cafe from him, wrapped in an old army jacket with a fading patch on the shoulder. Her name was Captain Emma Hayes. Jake didn't know it then, but Emma's story was one of pain hidden under medals. She'd served in Afghanistan, leading a convoy that hit an IED. The blast took her best friend's life, shattered her leg, and left her fighting the VA for the medical benefits she was promised. The system was broken, she knew that. But it hit different when it broke you. She didn't ask for help. She never did. But when her car broke down in the middle of Main Street one afternoon, Jake happened to be there. He fixed it, refused payment, and said only, "Just glad it's someone who gets it." From then on, their paths kept crossing. A coffee here, a shared walk there. Slowly, two broken souls began to find quiet understanding. Jake didn't pry, he just listened. And Emma, for the first time in years, felt like someone actually saw her beyond her scars. Then came the letter. A thick white envelope from a powerful law firm representing a defense contractor. One whose negligence had caused the faulty equipment failure that triggered the explosion in Emma's convoy. The letter wasn't an apology. It was a warning. The company was trying to silence her. Emma had gathered evidence that proved they'd knowingly sent defective armor plating overseas to cut costs. She hadn't even gone public yet, but they'd found out. They were threatening to sue her for defamation and breach of contract. That night, she sat in Jake's kitchen, her hands trembling over the papers. "They'll ruin me, Jake. They'll take everything." Jake looked at her, the weight of his own memories pressing in. "You fought for your country, Emma. Now we fight for the truth." What neither of them expected was what came next. 1 week later, 6 lawyers in sharp suits and 2 bodyguards walked into that same small cafe. They weren't there for coffee. They were there to serve her with papers, intimidation wrapped in legalese. The cafe went silent. Jake stood up. "You're not doing this here," he said, his voice calm but iron solid. The bodyguard stepped forward, but the look in Jake's eyes stopped them cold. They'd seen that kind of look before. The kind that came from men who'd seen too much, survived too much, and weren't afraid of anything anymore. The lawyers backed off, leaving the papers on the counter. But the damage was done. The weeks that followed were a blur of fear, anger, and determination. Emma's case drew attention when a local journalist picked up the story. Wounded veteran threatened by defense giant. Public sympathy swelled, so did the pressure. Jake became her rock. Between shifts and raising Lily, he helped her organize her documents, reach out to veterans groups, and prepare her case. They worked late into the night, surrounded by empty coffee mugs and stacks of files. But then the threats began. Anonymous calls, slashed tires. Someone even broke into Jake's garage one night, leaving behind a single bullet casing on his workbench. "Maybe we should stop," Emma whispered one night, fear breaking through her usual steel. Jake shook his head. "They're counting on that. On silence. Silence is how they win." Finally, the day came, the courtroom battle. The company had 6 attorneys. Emma had one, a young, passionate lawyer named Daniel Cruz, himself a veteran who'd been inspired by her story. Jake sat in the back of the courtroom, Lily beside him, holding his hand tight. As Emma took the stand, she spoke not just for herself, but for every veteran who'd been promised honor but handed paperwork and pain instead. Her voice trembled at first, then it grew steady, strong. She told the truth, the whole truth. The opposing lawyers threw everything they had, accusations, manipulation, twisted words. But Emma didn't waver. When they tried to dismiss her evidence, Jake stood and handed over a folder, maintenance logs he'd found buried in a public database, proving the company's negligence. The courtroom gasped. The judge called for recess. When the verdict finally came, it was like thunder after years of drought. The company was found guilty of negligence and obstruction. Emma was awarded damages, and the court ordered an independent review of military equipment contracts nationwide. But more than that, she'd won something deeper. 2 months later, the cafe was quiet again. The storm had passed. Emma walked in with her cane, smiled at Jake behind the counter, and said, "You still make the worst coffee in town." Jake laughed. "Wes, you'll just have to keep coming back to fix that." They didn't need grand speeches. They'd already said everything in the silence between them. The kind of silence that heals instead of hurts. Outside, a new sign hung on the window: Veterans Helping Veterans, Community Legal Fund, started by Emma, funded partly by her settlement, managed by Jake. Their mission was simple: no veteran fights alone again. Lily ran up with 2 mugs of cocoa, handing one to Emma. "Dad says you're a hero," she said softly. Emma smiled, eyes glistening. "Your dad's the real hero, sweetheart. He taught me how to fight again." And as the rain began to fall outside once more, 2 veterans sat in peace, not defined by their battles, but by the courage it took to keep fighting when no one was watching. Because sometimes, the bravest wars are fought in silence.